welcome to Sew with Stacy. Today we've got a fantastic project. We are going to make this incredible extra large shopping bag with this beautiful heart motif design on the front using a technique called reverse applique. It's also on the back of the bag. This project may look complex, but even the most beginner sewer can do this successfully and without too much trouble. So let's get our sewing machines and get sewing. To make our extra large tote bag, you will need to choose two fabrics, one for the outside of the bag and one for the inside of the bag. You will also want to have a selection of scrap fabrics that we'll use to do our patchwork design that will be in the reverse applique on the front of the bag. You will also need to choose some thread. I'm going to go with white because it matches the colors of the fabric that I have here. You'll also need a few items from your sewing toolkit. You'll want to grab your ruler, scissors, and fabric marker or chalk so you can measure and cut your fabric according to the pattern. You'll also want to grab your pins in case you want to use those to make sure the fabrics don't move while you sew. And finally, go ahead and grab that seam ripper. You never know when a mistake might happen. To make our bag, you will need 4 front panels that measure 18 by 21 inches. You will also need 2 inside panels that have the same measurement. We will also need to cut 2 strips of fabric that are 2.5 inches wide and 25 inches long for the handles. For our reverse applique, you will need 2 13-inch by 13-inch panels, either as a piece of fabric or using a patchwork panel. And finally, go to our website, sewwithstacy.com, and download our heart-shaped pattern that you can use to create your beautiful design on the bag. Sewing, we will need to prepare our front panels for the reverse applique process, as well as ensuring we have our cutouts for our boxing. So let's do the boxing first. We're going to cut 2.5-inch squares from each of the bottom corners of our bag. Next, we want to mark on our fabric where our heart shape will be. So we'll grab our heart shape template, which you can download off my website at sewwithstacy.com. We want to make sure that this is in the middle of our bag. So first we're going to try to find the midpoint of the bag. So if we have a bag that is 18 inches wide, we will know that the middle line is at 9. So we'll measure that and mark it on the fabric. Next, we want to make sure that the heart's in the middle from the top and the bottom. So we want to make sure that we have the middle mark for that part of the bag. We're going to take the middle mark from the top of our line here from the boxing out. Let's measure that. That's at 18.5. So we know our middle mark will be at 9.25. We're gonna just measure that out and put a mark at 9 1/4 inches. So now we can place the middle side of our heart on that middle line, and on your template you'll have a mark that marks the middle of the heart, and you'll align that with the middle marking we just put on the bag. So that means that heart will now be on the middle, exactly where we want it. Once you've lined it up, hold it in place and trace around your template. Flip the heart over and repeat. And now we have our heart shape for the middle of the bag. We need to repeat this process for the other 2 panels that will be for the front of the bag. Panel that will be on the inside of our bag, we will just need to cut out our 2.5 inch squares on the bottom of the bag in order to box it out.
Our project today, we're going to be using a technique called reverse applique. Now, applique is when you take some fabric and sew it on top of other fabric to create a beautiful design or a mosaic. So reverse applique is the opposite, where we're going to take some beautiful fabric and actually sew it behind another piece to create this illusion like you're looking through a window inside a piece of fabric.
To create this reverse applique look, what we need to do is to create a window of a heart shape inside the front panels of our bag. So to do that, we're going to take 2 of the panels that we've cut, put them together, and then we're going to sew along that heart-shaped line that we created earlier in our process. Now that we've sewn along that outline of the heart shape that we drew on our panel, our next step is to cut the middle of that heart out. And when you do that, you want to cut along the edge so that you have about 1/4 of an inch from the seam. Once that's all cut out, we're going to do a little nip at the bottom here, and we're going to cut a few notches along the curve so that it will lay more flat when we turn it through. Our next step is to turn one of the top panels all the way through so we create a nice heart shape in the middle of our panel. Once you line it all up, you'll see that there's a beautiful heart in the middle of our bag panel. I'm going to go ahead and press this so it's nice and flat, and we're going to repeat this exact same process on our second panel. Next, we need to create our panel that's going to go behind our beautiful heart on the front of our tote bag. Now, you can use just a plain piece of fabric, and you need a piece that's 13 inches by 13 inches. Or you can do what I'm planning to do, which is create a patchwork design with some strips of fabric you might have in your stash pile. I had these 1.5 inch strips of fabric that I would like to use for this pattern. So I've cut them into 13 inch lengths, and I'm going to use 13 of these strips so it will create that 13 by 13 inch panel for the bag. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to lay these out to the design I'm going to sew, and then I'm going to sew these pieces of fabric together. Now that I'm happy with my design, I'm going to take each of these strips and sew them together, which is what patchworking is. So to do that, you take the first strip and put it with the second strip right sides facing, and then you will sew along one edge with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Now I can fold it out, and I have these two pieces of fabric sewed together. I need to remember which one was my first piece and my second piece, because the next step is to then, from the second piece, bring the third piece in and sew those together along the edge. And doing the same process, right sides facing, we're going to sew the third piece to the second piece along that long edge. We're going to continue this process until all 13 of our strips are sewed together. We will then also create a second panel, same design, for the second panel of the front of our bag. Now that I'm done sewing together my strips of fabric to create my beautiful patchwork panel for my bag, I'm just going to quickly go press that, and I'll be right back. Now that we've finished our patchwork pieces, we need to do the reverse applique technique to finish off the two outside panels for our bag before we can construct it. To do that, we'll take one of our panels and grab one of the outside pieces for our bag and lay it on top. We then can move around our shape and our patchwork panel to have a design that we're really, really happy with. So the next step is to sew along the outer edge of our heart shape all the way around with a really nice clean top stitch. And what that will do is it will have the patchwork piece attached to that, and you now have this beautiful design for the front of your new tote bag. I recommend that you pin it in place before you start sewing so that patchwork piece won't move. And you'll need to complete this next step with the other panel for the bag as well. Once you've completed all your top stitching around the heart, you need to turn over the panel and trim off the excess fabric or patchwork that you've sewn on. You want to have about 1/2 inch from that seam line that you've sewn, and you need to do it for both panels. You've now completed the reverse applique of your patchwork panel onto the front panel of our bags. Before we can construct our bag, we need to put our handles together. So grab your strip that we've cut for our handle, fold it in half, and sew along that edge. You will use a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Now that we're done sewing, we need to turn this right side out. Use whatever method you have used previously for turning things right side out. I tend to fold it over and just use a pencil to push it through. You'll want to repeat that process with the second handle. Now that we've got both of our handles ready to go, I'm going to take these and press them and come right back. The final step with completing our handles is to do a top stitch on both sides of each strip of fabric. We will start by constructing the outside of our bag. So we'll need to grab one of the bag's outside panels and place it right side up on our table. Grab the second panel and lay it face side down on top of that panel and line up all of the edges. You will then pin it in place, making sure all 4 pieces are aligned as best as you can. And then we will sew along both outside edges and along the bottom edge, but not in that square cutout. We will do that next. our front panel sewn together, we now need to box out our bag. So that space where we cut out that 2.5 by 2.5 square, we're going to open it up and pull it out. Now remember, when we constructed this bag, we have 2 panels, so you need to make sure that you're opening it up and you can see the sewn seams on the inside. Once you open it up, you want to align those 2 edges so that it is straight, and then open up your seams so that they're nice and flat. We are then going to pin and sew along that straight edge, and this will create a little bit more fullness in the bag so you can put more things inside of it. Once we're happy, we'll go ahead and sew with a 1/2 inch seam allowance along that line, and we'll repeat it on the other side of your bag panel. Once you've completed sewing, you now just need to trim that edge to be about 1/4 inch from the seam line. We now want to do the same thing on the other side of the panel. Now that we are done with the outside panel of our bag, we need to repeat the process for the inside panels of our bag. So grab one of the pieces of fabric you've cut for the inside panel and lay it face up on your table. Grab the second piece and lay it face down and line it up. And just like with the front panel, we're going to pin the 2 pieces together, and we're going to sew along the outside edges of the 2 panels. We will not sew where that square cutout is. We will do that next. Just like with our front panel, we need to do the boxing out technique with our inside piece as well. So take that inside piece, open up that space, line up the fabric, open up those seams, pin it in place, and then sew along with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. And when you're done sewing, trim it so you have 1/4 inch to the seam allowance. And then of course, repeat it on the other side. We're now ready to put our bag together. So grab the front part of the bag, the inside lining of the bag, and your two handles. Your first step is to take the inside lining and turn it right side out, making sure those boxed corners are turned out properly. We're then going to take that lining and put it inside the front part of our bag. But remember, we sewed this together using two panels. So make sure to grab two panels, and when you open it up, you can see that beautiful reverse applique that we created inside the bag. Take our lining and put it inside. And then we need to line up the tops together. And you want to do that from starting on the seam edge. Line up those seams and pop out the edges so that they're open. And pin them in place. Do the same on the other side with the other seam. Now we need to put the handles on. So grab one of our handles, and what you want to do is you want to put this handle in between the front part of the bag and your inside lining. And you're going to put the whole handle inside the bag. This way, when we turn it right side out, it will be on the right side of the bag. You also want to make sure that your handles are not twisted and that they are lined up appropriately for how you want to have them on the outside of the bag. We then want to place them so that they are about 3 inches from the edge of that seam. You can do it by eye like I am, or you can get the ruler out and measure it directly. And you want to place the other side in as well, and make sure to pin them in place. We're then going to pin that long edge together with that inside lining. Again, make sure you're not getting the other side of the lining, that you're only getting one of those panels. You then want to turn your bag over and do the same thing with the next set of handles. Putting it between the lining and the outside of the bag. And this time you want to make sure that it's lined up. Whoops, let's do that again. That it's lined up with those handles that we pinned in on the other side. And once you're happy where your handles are placed, you then want to line up that long side of the edge and pin. We are now going to sew along that entire circumference of the bag, leaving about a 2 to 3 inch opening so we can turn the bag right side out. We'll go do that now. You want to sew with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Now we just need to turn it right side out. You now have your bag, but there's one final thing we need to do. We're going to go press this to make sure it's nice and flat and that our lining is on the inside and you can't see it peeping out on the outside of the bag. We finished pressing our bag, especially the top edge. We're now going to finish the bag by creating a lovely top stitch along the top to give it that really nice clean finish. Plus it will sew up that hole we had where we turned the bag right side out. Congratulations, you have now finished your beautiful extra large tote bag with this wonderful heart design using a brand new technique called reverse applique. What do you think? I love this bag. I use it all the time. It is my go-to shopping bag. Thank you so much for joining us today. If you liked this project, please like our video and subscribe to our channel. We have a great selection of beginning sewer projects specifically designed to help you learn how to use your machine and to create really cute, wonderful things that really don't take a whole lot of time. We also have a website, sewwithstacy.com, that is full of lots of hints and tips and some more information that you might want to know as a beginning sewer to get started on your sewing journey. Thank you, and I hope to see you again really soon.